UN Trade and Development projects global economic growth as stagnating at 2.7% in 2024 and 2025. UK's Finance Minister Rachel Reeves unveils the largest tax increases in 3 decades in her first budget. And European Union will impose tariffs of up to 45.3% on Chinese-built electric vehicles. Welcome to the Economic Bulletin, where we present comprehensive coverage and expert insights on key updates regarding pivotal economic trends and financial shifts. Welcome back to the news in detail. We start off with the UN Trade and Development, which has projected global economic growth as stagnating at 2.7% in 2024 and 2025, a notable decline from the 3% average between 2011 and 2019, and well below the pre-2008 average of 4.4%. The Trade and Development report emphasizes that this low normal growth is inadequate for addressing urgent development and climate goals, while the Global South enjoyed robust growth rates of 6.6% from 2003 to 2013. This has dropped to 4.1% over the past decade. Excluding China, the average growth rate in the Global South has been just 2.8% over the last 10 years. In Europe, a preliminary flash estimate from Eurostat, the European Union Statistical Office, shows that seasonally adjusted GDP rose by 0.4% in the euro area and by 0.3% in the European Union in the third quarter of 2024 compared to the previous quarter. In the second quarter of 2024, GDP increased by 0.2% in the euro area and 0.3% in the European Union. Seasonally adjusted annual GDP grew by 0.9% in both the euro area and the European Union in the third quarter, up from increases of 0.6% in the euro area and 0.8% in the European Union in the previous quarter. Ireland saw the largest increase, followed by Lithuania and Spain. Overall, 7 countries reported positive year-on-year growth rates, while 6 experienced negative growth. French economic growth has outpaced estimates, accelerating by 0.4% in the third quarter of 2024, up from 0.2% in the second quarter. The National Institute of Statistics and Economic Studies reported that the boost in growth is attributed to an influx of tourists for the Paris Olympics, which enhanced consumer spending in the Eurozone's second largest economy, resulting in a 0.5% growth for the third quarter after a flat performance in the previous quarter. Preliminary data has indicated that Italy's gross domestic product stagnated in the third quarter compared to the previous 3 months, falling short of expectations and raising concerns about growth prospects for the Eurozone's third largest economy. According to the Italian National Institute of Statistics, GDP grew by 0.4% year-on-year. The United Kingdom's new Finance Minister Rachel Reeves has announced the biggest tax increases in 3 decades in her first budget. Reeves said she would raise taxes by 40 billion British pounds a year to cover a 22 billion British pound shortfall. Citing the latest projections from the Office for Budget Responsibility, Reeves said that the UK economy is forecast to grow by 2% in 2025, while businesses will see a rise in national insurance contributions by 1.2% starting in April 2025. Additionally, the government plans to catalyze 70 billion British pounds of investment through a national wealth fund and raise taxes on private jet flights by up to 50%.
Compensation schemes that they did not fund, and their failure to assess the scale of the challenges facing our public services means.
In Germany, the Federal Labor Office figures showed that the number of unemployed people rose more than expected in October. The office said the number of unemployed increased by 27,000 in seasonally adjusted terms to 2.86 million. The seasonally adjusted job rate remained stable at 6.1%. According to Andrea Nahels, the head of the Labor Office, the anticipated improvement in the labor market in autumn has not occurred this year. U.S. job openings fell sharply in August, reaching their lowest point since January 2021, indicating a slowdown in the labor market. However, the number of vacancies remains significantly higher than pre-pandemic levels. According to the Labor Department, job openings decreased to 7.4 million in September, down from 7.9 million in August. The decline was particularly evident in the healthcare sector and among government agencies at the federal, state, and local levels. Layoffs also increased, while the number of Americans quitting their jobs dropped to below 3.1 million, the lowest since August 2020. The Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump has stated during a campaign rally in Allentown that the United States may impose tariffs of up to 200% on China or any other country to protect the economy. Trump emphasized his commitment to focusing on economic growth and making the United States the largest manufacturing hub in the world. He expressed his vision of restoring the U.S. as a great power and pledged to work on lowering oil and gas prices within the first year of his presidency.
It's amazing, a floating hospital, the biggest in the world. I will deliver the best future for Puerto Ricans and for Hispanic Americans. Today, I want America.
The U.S. economy continued to grow steadily in the third quarter, with declining inflation and wage increases driving consumer spending. The Commerce Department's Bureau of Economic Analysis said that the United States gross domestic product increased at a 2.8% annualized rate last quarter in its advanced estimate of third quarter GDP. The economy grew at a 3.0% pace in the second quarter. The pace of growth was well above what Federal Reserve officials regard as the non-inflationary growth rate of around 1.8%. Single-family house prices in the U.S. rose due to ongoing tight supply in August. Elevated mortgage rates are also contributing to keeping potential buyers on the sidelines. The Federal Housing Finance Agency said house prices rose 0.3% on a month-on-month basis after gaining 0.2% in July. They increased 4.2% in the 12th month through August after an upwardly revised 4.7% advance in July. The rise in annual house prices was previously reported to have been 4.5%. We stay in the United States, where consumer confidence rose to a 9-month high in October, reflecting improved perceptions of the labor market. The conference board reported that its consumer confidence index increased to 108.7, up from a revised 99.2 in September. Economists had expected a rise to 99.5 from the previously reported 98.7. Dana Peterson, chief economist at the conference board, noted that while this marks the strongest monthly gain since March 2021, the index remains within the narrow range it has occupied for the past 2 years. Moving to Asia, logistics data from the China Federation of Logistics and Purchasing for the first 3 quarters of this year shows steady growth in import logistics and strong consumer demand. Social logistics rose 5.6% year-on-year to 258.2 trillion yuan from January to September. Import logistics grew by 4.2%, supported by stable industrial production and increased imports of coal, natural gas, and iron ore. Innovative business models in the consumer sector led to a reported 60% increase in instant delivery volumes. Cold chain logistics showed signs of recovery, driven by changing consumer preferences, particularly in e-commerce and retail. Government data has shown that India's fiscal deficit for the April to September period reached 4.75 trillion rupees, accounting for over 29% of the annual estimate. The financial year in India runs from April to March. Net tax receipts totaled 12.65 trillion rupees, 49% of the annual target, and up from 11.6 trillion rupees last year. Total government expenditure during this period was about 44% of the annual goal, similar to last year's 21.2 trillion rupees. Capital expenditure for infrastructure development was 4.15 trillion rupees, down from 4.9 trillion rupees in the same period last year. Australian consumer price inflation has decreased to its lowest level in 3.5 years during the third quarter. The latest data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics revealed a 0.2% rise in the consumer price index for the quarter, slightly below the forecasted 0.3% increase. Annual inflation fell to 2.8% from 3.8%, marking its return to the Reserve Bank of Australia's target band for the first time since 2021, a development that was widely anticipated. This decline was largely influenced by a significant 17.3% drop in electricity prices due to government subsidies, along with a 6.2% decrease in petrol prices. South Africa's headline inflation fell to a 3.8% year-on-year in September 2024, down 2 percentage points from August, marking its lowest level in over 3 years. Monthly inflation remained steady at 0.1%, continuing to trend below the South African Reserve Bank's target midpoint of 4.5%, which may signal potential policy easing before year-end. Food inflation paused at 4.1% year-on-year, its lowest level in 50 months, excluding July's figures. In the MENA region, Egypt has signed a memorandum of understanding to explore establishing a public free zone on land allocated for the Administrative Capital Company. The memorandum was signed by the Administrative Capital for Urban Development in partnership with DP World and the General Authority for Investment and Free Zones. Khaled Abbas, Chairman and Managing Director of the Administrative Capital for Urban Development Company, announced that the memorandum outlines plans to study the development of a 500-acre free zone. According to a statement from Egypt's cabinet, the area holds strategic appeal for industrial infrastructure development with a total of 1,958 acres along the Cairo-Ain al-Sokhna corridor. Government of Dubai Media Office said that Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, ruler of Dubai, approved a 2025 to 2027 budget on Tuesday with almost $74.06 billion of expenditure, the biggest in the Emirates' history. The three-year budget cycle estimates as a total revenue of $82.22 billion. The budget will be focused on improving quality of life for residents in key sectors like health, education, culture, and infrastructure. Dubai allocated 46% of its spending to infrastructure projects, including roads, bridges, and water drainage networks. In 2025 alone, the estimated expenditures are 86.26 billion dirhams, with revenues projected at 97.66 billion revenues. Moving to the automotive sector, the European Union imposed tariffs on Chinese-built electric vehicles of up to 45.3%, following a year-long anti-subsidy investigation. These additional tariffs, ranging from 7.8% for Tesla to 35.3% for SAIC, will take effect on Wednesday and are on top of the standard 10% import duty. The European Union claims these tariffs are necessary to address unfair subsidies from China, which includes below-market pricing for land, batteries, and raw materials. In response to the European Union's anti-subsidy investigation findings, China's Ministry of Commerce stated that it rejects the results and filed a lawsuit under the World Trade Organization dispute settlement mechanism. Affected Chinese companies will face different countervailing duties: 17% for BYD, 18.8% for Geely, and 35.3% for SAIC. Tesla, after submitting an individual review request, will be subject to a 7.8% tariff. A spokesperson from the ministry emphasized China's disapproval of the European Union's actions.
The European Union has imposed new tariffs of up to 35% on electric vehicles imported from China, citing what it claims are unfair subsidies that give Chinese manufacturers an edge in Europe's EV market. These duties, which have raised concerns over the potential trade war, follow an investigation that revealed extensive Chinese state support, allowing local brands to undercut European auto markets. Major Chinese EV markets are impacted, along with foreign automakers producing in China, which faces nearly 8% in additional tariffs. Despite support from France, Germany has warned of escalating trade tensions, with its Auto Industry Association criticizing the tariffs as a step backward for free trade. These new duties, set to last 5 years, add to the existing 10% import tax on Chinese EVs. Notably, they apply not only to Chinese brands, but also to foreign automakers producing in China. Beijing condemned the decision, pledging to protect the legitimate rights of Chinese firms and launching investigations into European exports, with provisional tariffs already imposed on some goods. Talks between EU and China continue, with the possibility of a minimum price agreement for EVs in Europe.
The Commission has identified...
EU Trade Chief Valdis Dombrovskis defended the tariffs as necessary for fair market practices. However, significant differences remain as discussions progress.
Joining us today is Dr. Abdellatif Darwish to talk more about the European Union's finalization of its higher tariffs on electric vehicles imported from China. Dr. Abdellatif, welcome to the Economic Bulletin. So, China reportedly told car makers to pause investment in European countries. How will these tariffs affect the trade relationship between the European Union and China?
You know, I believe that the Chinese products and commodities always having this competitive and comparative advantage because of the mass production of China, the cheap products, and other aspects or characteristics of the Chinese product. So the European Union and the West in general, and the United States and Europe cannot compete with Chinese products. So it is a way to create a kind of difficulties by imposing different kind of, sometimes even sanctions, or tariffs or taxation or whatever, in order to create difficulties for the Chinese product to compete with the European and not to enhance it. So because I believe that the Western countries have lost the battle with the Chinese economy and Chinese product and industry, so it's the way to create difficulties for China.
From a geopolitical context, how do these tariffs fit into the larger geopolitical context between the European Union, China, and the United States, especially regarding technological competition in green energy?
Yeah, I believe it may create even military and political tension among these countries, between Europe and all the Western countries and China, because this creates problem in the supply chain, creates problem in the international trade, the free trade, where Western have been telling us for so many years that it is fair play. I don't believe that with this kind of measures that there is what we call it fair play. There is no fair play because they lost the competition with China. So I believe this will harm the international trade, will create difficulties in the relation between China and the European and the Western countries. This is very big. I believe that this is against international law, but this is the way that Europeans always see only their own side for this.
Speaking of international trade, how do you define fair versus unfair subsidies in the context of international trade, especially with regard to EVs?
Look, I believe that there must be a kind of laws protection. Sometimes the Western countries are talking about copyright and all this. So I believe that there must be a kind of respect for international law, the international trade, and because I believe that commercial business or trade will enhance the political relation between or among countries. But this creates a kind of bigger tension, bigger problems, and I believe the international economy needs more, let me say, flexibility in the international trade, not sanctions or any other measures that create problems and barriers for the international trade.
Now, looking at the wider picture, what are the potential long-term economic impacts of these tariffs on innovation and technology transfer in the EV sector?
Yes, this will create another problem because I believe we have to help in the movement of knowledge, information, and technology which may enhance the human's life and even at least will help in which I don't see that we have the product availability for everybody, cheaper products, but this creates, I believe, bigger problems for especially the poor countries because they mainly depend on Chinese products, and I believe this will create a bigger problem in the international economies. I believe that the situation that we are living now, it is that Western are trying to defend their position that they have been occupying for the last 100 years, to controlling the international economy, so they cannot understand that competition which they have created and fair play must be there in order for everybody to present his own product, his own ideas, his own technology, and enhance the human life, not creating barriers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abdellatif Darwish, for your valuable insights. Thank you. In its latest report, the World Bank's projects that global commodity prices will reach a 5-year low in 2025 due to unprecedented oil glut. The report also states that overall commodity prices will remain 30% higher than in the 5 years before the COVID-19 pandemic. Oil supply is expected to exceed demand by 1.2 million barrels per day, driven by demand in China and increased production from non-OPEC plus countries. The report also highlights that gold prices will rise by 21% over 2023 averages and remaining 80% above pre-pandemic levels. Energy prices are expected to drop, reducing inflationary pressures for central banks, though Middle East conflicts could disrupt supply, driving prices up. Oil prices rose 2% after media reports showed that OPEC Plus could delay an oil production increase that was scheduled for December. Brent crude futures gained 1.6% to $72.22 a barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures edged up by 1.6% to $68.28 per barrel. Gold surged as uncertainty surrounding the U.S. presidential race drove demand for safe haven assets. Spot gold rose 0.1% to $2,777 per ounce. U.S. gold futures rose 0.3% to $2,789.20. That's all for now. Here's a roundup of today's key headlines. UNCTAD projects global economic growth as stagnating at 2.7% in 2024 and 2025. UK's Finance Minister Rachel Reeves unveils the largest tax increases in 3 decades in her first budget. And European Union will impose tariffs of up to 45.3% on Chinese-built electric vehicles. That's all for today's Economic Bulletin on Qnews. Stay connected for more news and updates. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Qnews EG to stay informed. For real-time updates, connect with us on the UMS digital platform. Watch it. Thank you so much for watching.